Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So this video is going to be a bit different than my normal Stephen King content. Instead of talking directly about a Stephen King book or telling you why you should read a Stephen King book or what Stephen King books you should read, instead I'm going to choose a Stephen King book, and based upon if you like that book, I will be recommending more books. Basically, it'll be if you like this Stephen King book, try out this book. And for this video, it's simple enough. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to show you guys 5 Stephen King books, and I'm going to give you 5 recommendations based on those Stephen King books. So if you like this Stephen King book, try this other book out. So yeah, pretty simple. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for my first pick, if you like The Shining by Stephen King, try Wonderland by Zoe Stage. These two books actually have a lot in common with each other, even though that this was written in like the late 70s and this was just released a few years ago. They have a lot of comparisons, and rightfully so. A lot of reviewers called this like a modern version of The Shining, so it makes sense that if you like this book, you should probably try out this book. But anyway, if you haven't heard of The Shining, Jack is a recovering alcoholic. He is a struggling writer, and he takes the job of becoming a caretaker for the Overlook Hotel. So of course, this sounds like the perfect job for him. He can look over the hotel during the winter when it's going to be really stormy, when no one's there, and he'll bring along his wife and his son. He'll get a lot of writing done. Everything will go according to plan. No. And what you get instead is one of the most famous haunted house stories of all time. Very famous. I'm sure there's not a lot of people who have never heard of The Shining or at least know its general premise. Like, it's very famous. And ever since then, there have been a lot of people who have tried to recapture that same horror and suspense that Stephen King does in this book with his haunted hotel. But a lot of people kind of pale in comparison. But for me, Wonderland by Zoe Stage is a fantastic haunted house story. And like I said, Wonderland is very similar to The Shining. Not an exact copy, mind you. It's very original. But it does start out similarly, where you've got this mother character, and she's kind of retired. She used to be a ballet dancer in New York, I believe. And she's now since retired, and now she's kind of letting her husband, who wants to be a painter, while she was a ballet dancer, he kind of was taking care of the children and everything. But now he wants to become a painter and flourish at his passion, while she kind of takes a back seat. And they decide to move into this more rural area, very wintry environment, just like the Overlook Hotel. And of course, it's a haunted house story, so right away you start getting these weird things happening. I will say, though, about halfway through the novel, it kind of takes a turn, and it gets very weird, even weirder than The Shining does in some scenes. It takes a very weird turn, but I think if you love great character work and just past trauma, like, there's a lot of... This book, I will be going on an impromptu rant here. Even though this is classified as horror, it's really literary horror, because a lot of this book is just dealing with past trauma, like between all 3 of the main characters, Jack, Wendy, and Danny. A lot of it is just bringing up the past over and over again. And very similarly, Wonderland brings up a lot of past trauma with the characters, and it's great. And not only do you get the past trauma like you do with The Shining, but it's also very atmospheric. You can feel the cold, you can feel the dread. And for those reasons, I feel like if you like The Shining, you should really give Zoe Stage and Wonderland a chance. I think you're really going to enjoy it. The next pick I have here is rather simple and very surface level, but I'll get into it a little bit. So, if you like Salem's Lot by Stephen King, you might like Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin. And yes, these are my two favorite authors of all time. For anyone who doesn't quite know what this one's about, it's actually Stephen King's vampire novel, and this was his second published novel. And basically, what King wanted to do was that he was a really big fan of Dracula, and he basically wanted to take Dracula and slap it into a small rural Maine town in America. And that's essentially what you get. And it's very good. Not one of my all-time favorite King books, perhaps, but it's definitely one of the creepiest, definitely one of the scariest, and the horror elements are definitely here in this one. Characters are great, not like all-time great, but they're pretty good. And yeah, it's just a really good vampire novel. And for me, I'm not a huge vampire fan. I know a lot of horror fans love vampires, but really, it's one of my least favorite tropes. But Stephen King does it very well. And of course, my favorite author of all time, George R. R. Martin, Fever Dream, also a vampire novel. And of course, this is easily my favorite vampire novel of all time, which isn't saying much because really it's Fever Dream and Salem's Lot, and then maybe like one other one that I don't remember. But yeah, Fever Dream. So they're both vampire novels, right? This one, I will say, leans more on the horror side. This one it's a bit different. But I think if you're a vampire fan, you may not have actually heard of this one. Like I said, it's by George R. R. Martin, and obviously his most famous stuff is A Song of Ice and Fire. So maybe you've never even heard of this. My favorite part of trying out a vampire novel is learning about the lore of the vampires, because with every vampire novel you have to set up different rules. Like every vampire novel has different rules and different like customs for the vampires to follow, like oh, these vampires in this book do this, but in my book they do this, right? And that's the best part. So like the vampires in Salem's Lot are going to be different than the ones in Dracula. They're going to be different than the ones in Twilight, right? Which we won't get into Twilight. But yeah, Fever Dream, definitely my favorite part about this book was the world building and the lore. Very good. I will say the horror aspects are here, but for me, the best part about this was learning about George's vampires, and it was just a lot of fun. So if you do like Stephen King's Salem's Lot and you're a big vampire fan, I would go ahead and check out Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin, my all-time favorite vampire novel. Again, not saying much because I'm not a huge vampire fan, but give it a whirl. For anyone who's read these two books, they might not quite get the connection at first, but I'll explain. So for this next one, if you enjoy Needful Things by Stephen King, you should go ahead and try Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. I am in no way biased here, right? It's only my favorite horror novel of all time. And again, for anyone who doesn't know what Needful Things is about, it's basically about this guy named Leland Gaunt who moves into Castle Rock, Maine, where a lot of Stephen King stories take place. And he opens up this shop, and basically a lot of weird and wacky stuff is there for sale. And he doesn't sell it for money. He doesn't sell these items for money. A lot of people come into the store and it's stuff that they really want. And basically, he doesn't want money. He just wants these small favors. And it kind of escalates into people doing these things for Leland Gaunt, and basically all hell breaks loose, and it's pretty crazy. But the reason why I'm comparing it to Imaginary Friend, and I'm saying like if you like Needful Things, read Imaginary Friend, is because of the fantastic character work. In Needful Things, you have a large cast of characters because he really focuses on the town of Castle Rock, and there's so many great characters in here, great character work, because you've got people like coming into the shop who want, who see these things and they want to buy them, and you get a lot of their past, and you get a lot of like how their mind works, and just constantly flipping back and forth between characters. And Stephen King is just brilliant at doing that. And the reason why Imaginary Friend works so well is because, Stephen Chbosky just did an amazing job of flipping back and forth between like this very large cast of characters. And so maybe the story isn't exactly the same, right? Because this is more, and it's hard, and again, it's hard to talk about this book without spoiling it, but it's different. I will say though that both books have fantastic characters, large cast of characters, and both authors in both books do a fantastic job of differentiating between all of the character voices. And yeah, so I think if you really like Needful Things, you're gonna really enjoy Imaginary Friend. For constant readers, you might be able to guess what book I'm going to bring up next. If you like It by Stephen King, I think you would really enjoy The Child Thief by Brom. And for anyone who doesn't know what It is about, which I'm pretty sure most people have heard of It by now, but if you haven't, it's basically about this town in Derry, Maine, where the entity known as Pennywise, the clown, has been murdering children. And basically in this book, you follow the Losers Club, which is a group of 7 people, and you get alternating timelines of them as an adult, remembering their past and how they first got to know Pennywise. That's one way to say it. But yeah, so you get really good kid characters in here because you get them when they're adults. But I think the main reason why people love this book is because of the chapters where they're written as children, as preteens. And obviously King is a master character writer, and a lot of people praise his children, the writing of children specifically. And that's kind of my main comparison for The Child Thief by Brom. And funny enough, Joanna was the one who mentioned this book to me. She said that I would really like it because of the kid characters in this book. And she basically said that, since Stephen King is fantastic at writing kid characters, that's why she compared it to this. And so I went into it kind of with that mindset, like, oh, okay, it's going to have great kid characters. And it did. like from the first couple of chapters, I'm like, oh, this guy can write children very well. And I think it makes sense because this is essentially a dark Peter Pan retelling. And if you know anything about Peter Pan, it's about Peter Pan taking children to Neverland where they can never grow up. And yeah, so you got a bunch of these different kids. And he's very great at writing kid characters, just like Stephen King. God damn, this book is big. So yeah, if the reason that you liked It by Stephen King, obviously, if you liked the kid characters in It specifically, which that's probably my favorite part about this book, I think it's slightly overrated. But I do really enjoy the kid characters. If you enjoy the kid characters, I would definitely go ahead and check out The Child Thief by Brom. This was a fantastic example of a writer writing kid characters spectacularly. So if you like It, check out The Child Thief. And then we're going to end on a downer here. These next 2 books are depressing as all get out. And that's why I think if you like one of them, you will enjoy the other one. Not because they're similar stories, but just you'll see. You get it. If you enjoy Pet Cemetery by Stephen King, I think you will really enjoy The Push by Ashley Audrain. And if you don't know what Pet Cemetery is about, it's basically about this family who again moves to a small town. I think it's in Maine. Most of Stephen King's stories take place in Maine. And they're kind of having troubles because they live right next to this very busy road where a lot of like 18-wheelers just fly down it. And you get a little bit into the book and their cat dies, and you figure out that there's this pet cemetery where if you bury a pet there, it will come back to life. And this book just delves into some very serious talks about death and just afterlife and like really hard-hitting and dreadful themes. And yeah, it's very impactful. Again, not one of my all-time favorites, but definitely one of the more just dread-inducing Stephen King books you'll ever read. It's very depressing, and that's kind of why I pick The Push by Ashley Audrain. Now, if you've seen any of my videos, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this book. Normally, books don't get to me. Like, I usually just read books and I enjoy what I read. But this book was just so dread-inducing and just such a gut punch to my soul. And if you've read Pet Sematary, you'll probably get a similar feeling reading this book. It has similar themes, and it's hard to talk about without spoiling it. But yeah, it's really good, but also just be prepared for it being a gut punch to your soul, which is the perfect way for me to describe my experience of it. But yeah, I think if you like Pet Cemetery and you like being sad, then you'll like The Push by Ashley Audrain. So if you like Pet Cemetery, go read The Push. All right, so those are all of my recommendations for this video. For my, if you like Stephen King, if you like this Stephen King book, try this other book out. And I do plan on making more videos in this style. And funny enough, I think I'm going to do a version of, if you like this Stephen King book, try this Stephen King book out. I think that'll work actually, because not everyone has read every single Stephen King book like I have. And a lot of people have either read only his older stuff or a lot of his newer stuff. So I think it'll be fun to give recommendations, just like if you've read this Stephen King book, go read this other similar Stephen King book. Just to give people more excuses to read more Stephen King if you need any more in the first place. I think that'll be probably the next video I make, or next Stephen King video at least, so be on the lookout for that. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found some good recommendations. Let me know if you agree with any of my choices here, or if you didn't. I'd love to chat with you about it in the comments. And let me know if you have any other similar recommendations for if you like this particular Stephen King book, you might like this particular book. Please let me know about any of those that you have percolating in your mind down below, and I'd love to chat with you about it in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Bookish Drummer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me, go check out my Patreon channel. That's just a way you can further support me financially. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can go check out my Patreon page and you'll get some extra perks that way. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video and have a terrific day.